we're going to go ahead and get started. Today is day 3 of the IMA series, and there are a couple of questions at the bottom. I'm taking a look at those. Let me broadcast those results for you. All right, so it looks like a couple of people have used the Changes tab, so that's really good because some people don't even if they've been in IMA for a while, they just don't even notice it. They don't even realize it exists. So we're going to be talking about that some today and how that can help you. And so it looks like most people have never created a change request either. So it really varies month to month. This month I know it really seems like most of the users attending have never really done anything in IMA. So this is really good for me to know. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Today is day 3, and we are covering IMA features. And still loading. Oh, there we go. All right. Okay. So I am recording today's webinar just like all the other ones this week. I'll be sending those out at the end of the week. And if you need the PowerPoint and you haven't downloaded it, it is available on the right side above the chat pod. As a reminder, please put yourself in Do Not Disturb status in all messaging apps and close all email applications until the session is over. That'll just help make sure you get the most from the session that you can. And all participants have been muted, so please use the chat pod to ask any questions. And we will re-enter interactive talk mode at the end of the session for any final questions. So Monday we covered IMA basics and terminology. Yesterday we went over setting up new items with a new item grid, and today we are covering several different things that fall under IMA features. So the purpose of today's session is to provide an overview of features within IMA that may be required to manage your items. After completing this session, you will be able to identify all locations of an item in the IMA workflow, explain how to access and approve returned items and pending change requests that require vendor approval, demonstrate how to use changes grid, and identify errors that result during the syncing process. So to meet those objectives, the topics we'll be covering today include Quick Search in Changes tab, Return to Items Task List, Change Existing Items, Data Catalog Notifications, and General Task List. So you'll notice yesterday we covered the new items section under Data Catalog and Grid History. So today we're covering these other options in the menu under Data Catalog, and then under Task List you'll see General, and we'll be covering that as well. All right, so first we're going to be talking about Quick Search and the Changes tab. So what is Quick Search? It provides a summary of basic information and workflow status for a single KSN, and it's basically the fastest method to find out what role your item is in and if it's completed the process to become operational. So this is usually one of the first tasks that someone will do in the IMA after they log in. Before they try to work an item, usually they start off by searching for items to see if they're operational or if they're still pending. And it really just provides a good snapshot of your item. So to access it, you just click Search here. And then you can select your criteria from this drop-down. Now I know there's several options here. The 3 that you will most likely be using include KSN number, core item number, and UPC. What's really nice about this is after you select a criteria, it actually updates the information under this field to give you an example of the criteria you selected. So I know on Monday I talked about how KSNs are actually 9 digits, but you often only see them as 7 digits because you have to leave off that dash and check digit. Sometimes there's a 0 at the beginning of it, so you could actually leave off the 0 if there's a 0 at the front end. So in this example, you can see they did leave off that dash and check digit. If you were to enter it in Quick Search, you actually wouldn't come back with any search results. So here in this example, core item was selected. So in this example, it's a 3-digit division, a dash, and then the item number. This particular item, the status is existing. Next steps is empty because there are no next steps. It's fully operational. Whenever you do a quick search for an item, you will always see the KSN listed. And if it's a Sears item and it has been created yet, you will see the core item number listed. So that core item number doesn't get created until the merchant role. So if the merchant hasn't created that yet and it's still in process and it's a Sears item, then you wouldn't see the core item number. But otherwise, you will always see it listed on the quick search page. You also will always see the SHC hierarchy, that division, category, and subcategory, as well as your KSN description. But down at the bottom, you can see there's a graphical depiction within the squares. Whenever it's fully operational, all of these will be filled in blue and will say complete. Now, in this example, again, UPC was selected. It gives an example for UPC. We can see the status for this one is in process. So there is information under next steps. It says entities currently in the vendor role, please contact the vendor to approve. So you would know that there is some sort of action that's required by you, if this is an item you own, to get this item into operational status. So down at the bottom, the graphical depiction, you can see the squares. The workflow row box is green, and it has the date that it first entered that workflow row. And then the hold state, bridging, and operational row are not filled in, and they all say not reached yet. Now, you may remember from Monday with the workflow rows that we went over, there are more than just the 4 rows that you see here. So this particular box, when it says workflow rows, it's actually referring to any of the manual rows. So again, the process starts with you as the vendor, then it's going to get passed to the merchant role, then it's going to get passed to inventory analyst, and then it's going to go on to supply chain. And then from there, it continues on to these automated rows, hold state, bridging, and operational. All right, so this example is a little bit more complicated. This one says for status, existing changes pending. So what that means is that this item has been operational. Perhaps there's already been orders placed on it, but there is either a change request pending or there is a new vendor pack that is currently being set up for this existing item. We don't exactly have enough information from this to go on. Under next steps, it says it's currently in the workflow row. Well, like I said on the last slide, workflow row can refer to any of those manual roles. So it could be any 4 of those, and we wouldn't know just from looking at the screen. So you can actually find more information by clicking this Changes tab over here on the very far right side of the screen. So again, it's on the far right side of the screen, and if you look at the workflow state column, you can see the rows that the item is in. So this one says vendor create / review entity. So in this specific example, there is something new. If you look over on the far left side under entity column, you can see vendor pack. So there's a new vendor pack, and the vendor has created it, but they haven't approved it. So that's why it's still showing in the vendor row here under workflow state. All right, so this is a scenario that can happen pretty frequently. After making changes to an item, the merchant or inventory analyst keeps telling me to approve my items, but I'm pretty sure that I did. And when I do a quick search for the KSN, it's actually showing that it's in the merchant role. So is your buying team crazy? Are they just confused? What's going on there? So the issue is that part of the item may be in the merchant role, but part of it may also be in the vendor role and requires action. So the unfortunate thing about using quick search is it can't always provide an entire picture of your item. So sometimes there's not quite enough information there for you to know if there's action required by you. So if you run into an instance like this, I would recommend that you review the Changes tab, again, over on the far right. We're going to look at a few examples that you could encounter and what they mean in actuality. So in this specific one, you can see first off, looking at type, everything is new. Looking at entity, you can see that there's all these different pieces. And then workflow state column, you can see that there are several pieces in vendor role, a couple pieces in the merchant role. So remember on Monday, we talked about all those components or pieces of an item in IMA, the KSN, the item, the vendor pack, the package, the core item, and there's more too, but those were the ones that were relevant to you as a vendor. So all of those pieces can sometimes be separated within IMA into separate roles. And so that's where the quick search page, sometimes you need a little bit more information and look at this changes tab. So in this one, this happens when an item goes to the merchant role and then they return it to the vendor role for some reason. The core item in particular, since that gets created in the merchant role, those pieces will never go back to the vendor. So those are always going to stay in the merchant role. But everything else is in the vendor role. So if you saw this, you would know that you need to approve this item. Okay, we're going to look at some more examples. Again, this is where it just says it's in the workflow row, which is really vague and could mean several things. So if you click the Changes tab, these are some of the things that you might see. So in this one, we can see that the change type is CHG, so that means the item type is CHG. So that means change. This is a change request. If we look at change detail, you can actually see the specific change request, so it's a cost change. And then if we review the workflow state, we can see that it says vendor review / update. So what this means is that there has been a change request created and it requires your approval. So it went to your task list, and so you need to approve or delete this change request. Otherwise, it's just going to kind of hang out there. This may happen with cost changes, for example. So typically, we try to encourage the vendors to initiate the cost change, but merchants can actually initiate that, and it does require approval by both the vendor and the merchant. So if the merchant initiates a cost change, it's always going to go to you for approval. Okay, so in this example, again, we can see it's a change request, and you can see it's a cost change. Under workflow state, it says create change request, and then under initiator, there's an ID. So this happens a lot as well. Someone will create a change request, they'll save it, but then they'll forget to actually approve it, and they'll go on with their day. So it just kind of sits out there in IMA, just pending. So what happens is the person that initiated it, they need to go back and actually approve the change request. So if this user ID is yours, then that's what you need to do. You need to click the workflow tab right up here and approve it. If you recognize this initiator ID, maybe it's somebody else at your company, or maybe it's even your buyer, you may want to reach out to whoever this ID belongs to and let them know that they need to approve the change request they created. If you don't recognize it at all, just email imahelp@searshc.com, and they'll help reach out to whoever that belongs to, so it can either be approved or deleted. All right, so in this example, this is a new vendor pack. Over here we can see new, entity is vendor pack. And workflow state, we can see it says vendor create / review entity, and then initiator is e-catalog. So anytime the initiator is e-catalog, that means that it came from data catalog, or your data synchronization provider. So this was a new vendor pack that was synced over from your data catalog provider. Anytime there's something that's been synced over from your data catalog provider, it's going to appear in your new item data catalog task list. So you would load your task list and you would locate the OPR new items. So yesterday when I was showing you the filtering, under the item type, you have an option of new. If you have change request in that task list, you have the option of CHG. And if you have new vendor packs in that task list, then you have the option of OPR new. So you could select the OPR new option under type and filter those out, and then you can access just the new vendor packs. So you would place them on a grid, complete the required fields, and then approve. So any questions at all about using the Changes tab and kind of doing some investigation into where your item might be? I know sometimes the easiest thing to do is just to always reach out to the help desk, but it's not always the fastest thing to do. We only have 4 people that operate our help desk, and they support thousands of vendors, and they support all of our internal roles, so sometimes it can take a little bit to get a response just because they can only work so fast. So sometimes using the Changes tab can be much more efficient. Okay, so I'm looking, I did see a question. I don't know if it was there before or if it just came up. But Stephanie is asking, can you see a bunch of items at once there? Do you mean here on the Changes tab? Okay, so the Changes tab can only be viewed in single edit, so it can only be viewed for a single item at a time. But most likely, if you have items grouped together, it's very probable, like if several change requests were done to several items and you were expecting that, you can check on one and see where one is. And it's probably going to be the same for the others, not necessarily, but you can kind of spot check to see. So good question. All right, so I do have a quick knowledge check for you. True or false, quick search does not always provide enough information to determine which role requires action on the item. So go ahead and take a few seconds and answer that question. All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, so great job. Most of you did get this correct. This is true. Quick search does not always provide enough information to determine which row requires action on the item. So always be sure, if you have any question at all, if you feel like it's not providing enough information, to check that Changes tab. Great job. All right, so we are going to move on to the returned items task list. So if an in-process item is returned to the vendor row for updates, it's going to go to the returned items task list. So yesterday when we were working with setting up new items, items that are synced over go to the new item task list, and items that are returned go to the return items task list. I mean, it makes sense. So if a vendor's profile is set up correctly, you should receive an email alert whenever items have been returned to you. And if you aren't receiving those email alerts, you can always reach out to imahelp@searshca.com, and they'll help get that set up correctly for you. So to access the returned items task list, you're going to hover over Data Catalog and click Returned Items. It will load this page. You can enter your paid items number, but you do have to select your division. Some of you, if you only ever set up your items in one division, you may only have one option for that. But if you do work in multiple divisions, you would need to select the one you want to look at. So it'll load the task list, and this is what it looks like. To view more information about why the item was returned, you can click the Show Details hyperlink over here on the very far right side. It's going to pop up a new window that contains this information here, so you can review the comments. It does require some sort of comment to be entered for a row to return it to a previous row. Hopefully your buyer actually entered something that is useful, such as this one, says update cost to $3.95. So maybe you processed these items with the correct cost originally, but while it was waiting for the merchant to do their item setup, you and the buyer decided that you negotiated a different cost. So then they return it to you to update the cost to the new cost that you agreed on. So if you agree with whatever request they're asking you to do, you would select the box here on the far left side and then click Create Grid. So this time, you'll notice any other type of grid that we create, we're going to have to name it. When we did our new item grid yesterday, we did not have to enter a name. It names it by default. But all these other grids we're going to be talking about today, you do have to name. So you would enter a grid name and click Save. And you would locate whatever field they're asking you to update, and you would make the change and click Approve. So again, think back to Monday when we went over the terminology. They wanted you to change the cost in this example, and that you know that the cost lives on the Vendor Pack tab, so that's how you would find it. You could click the Vendor Pack tab, and then you could scroll through until you found the cost. And just like yesterday with the grid history, you go through that again. Once it's approved, the status is going to display as completed. So any questions about the returned items task list? All right, so we're going to go on to change existing items. So most people, when they first start doing change requests, the type of change requests they do are something we call just single edit change request, where you're doing a change for a single item. You're going to find, if you've been doing that, or if you do that first before you transition to this, you're going to find that the changes grid, also known as the change existing items feature, is so useful and beneficial to you. You can do change requests for up to 50 items at a single time, and you can do multiple change requests for those items. So it's going to save you a lot of time. So there are some changes that should be synced over from your data catalog provider. This is a list of all the fields that I will accept from your data catalog provider to update. Now, if it's not on this list, you will have to do the change request using another method. Most likely, like I said, the change existing items or the changes grid feature is the one that you'll want to be using. So these are all the fields that you can change using the changes grid. So I'm not going to read off all of these, but you'll see some of these on the screens when we go through the overview, and then we're actually going to do a demo as well, so I can walk you through in the demo. So again, this is going to be a high-level overview, and then I'll go into more detail in the demo. So you access it by hovering over Data Catalog and go to Change Existing Items. In Section 1, you're going to select the fields that you want to change. In Section 2, you enter the criteria that you want to change, like the G10s, KSMs, or core div items, and then you click Create Grid. If you don't know that exact information, if you don't know the exact KSMs, you can search for them by using the select criteria on the right side. You would select your order done, your division category, whatever information you want to enter, and then you could search. It will come back with search results from where you can select what you want to edit on the left side, and then you can click Create Grid as well. So just like with the returned items grid, you do have to enter a name. And it does bring all of the fields that you selected under the Section 1. It brings those into your default view, which is really nice. So you see here it's selected with the checkbox at the top. And then down here, you'll see the green highlighted rows, and that's where you're supposed to enter your new information. So once you've entered your updated information, you would just click Approve, and it would go through the grid history. Once it's completed, then it would be good to go. Just a call out, again, it's really common for people to initiate changes, to save it, but then to forget to approve it. So make sure that you do approve any change request that you create. And a special note about cost changes. So if you have Sears items, those cost changes should be initiated and approved in the vendor role within IMA. and then the change will have to be approved through the merchant rule. If you have Kmart items, the cost changes for Kmart are not created directly in IMA. There's another application, it's called the Price Management Application, and the change must be completed through there. Now, whether or not you will need to go into the Price Management Application is between you and your merchant. I know some buying teams, the buyers always do it. Some buying teams, the vendors want to go in and do it. So it's something that you'll have to decide between you and your merchant. But if you do have questions or you want training on the Price Management Application, you should reach out to the price change request at searshc.com email. Okay, so now we are going to do a demo of the changes grid. So give me 1 second to share my screen. All right, so you guys should be seeing my screen now. So again, to access the changes grid, you're going to hover over data catalog, click change existing items. So here, this is where you can select the fields that you want to update. So let's say I want to update my vendor stock number, and I want to update, let's do cost. All right, and then in section 2 is where you can enter your specific information. So let me grab my KSNs. Okay, so what's really nice about this, whenever you see these 2 arrows going up and down, you can copy and paste information into those fields directly from a Word file or an Excel file. Most times you should be able to copy them from an email. So that's really convenient to use that. Again, please don't put more than 50 items on a grid. The system will allow you to, but it makes the system run slow for everybody else whenever you put too many items on a grid or you try to work too many items on the new item grid. So always keep it less than 50. All right, so I clicked Create Grid, and now I'm going to have to name my grid once it comes up. There we go. Okay. And I clicked Save. So again, it brings this into your default view. Your default view is selected here next to fields. This changes radio button. So I can enter my updated information. I can use those double down arrows on the right to drop that down. I can update my vendor stock number the same way. So let's say I came in here and, oh, I meant to grab something, I meant to grab another field as well, and I forgot to grab that. So you wouldn't have to approve this and then do another changes grid for the same exact items for that field that you forgot. You can actually go locate it within the grid from here. So I'm going to go to the Packages tab, and let's say I want to update the fabric metal content and the brand. Now, something else that's nice, if you have to go to multiple tabs to select your fields, you can click the changes right here again. It brings you back to your default view, and now all of those additional fields that you selected are going to be in your default view. So again, just complete the fields that you want to update and copy those down. I'm not going to change the fabric right now. I'm going to leave it as is. And then you would just click Approve. So it may take a second to load, but it will take you to your grid history page. And it's going to, it only does this in production, I think, or not production, it only does it in QA. So it should take you to your grid history page, not just load it up like that. Okay. I know there's no change request on this item because I checked our import class. I'm going to try clicking Approve again. There we go. See, that's what it's supposed to do. That should behave that way in production. Sometimes with the QA environment, it's where they do a lot of testing and a lot of test deploys. so it doesn't always behave 100% how it's supposed to live. But you'll see it reloads your page automatically, and you can see it already went through, it was approved, and it's completed. Give me 1 second to stop sharing. Okay. All right, so any questions about the changes grid? Okay, I do have a quick question for you over on the right side. Multiple change requests for up to how many items can be done at a single time in the changes grid? All right, just a couple more seconds, and then I'll end the poll. All right, so most of you did get this correct. You can do change requests for up to 50 items at a time. So great job. I much prefer that you guys selected 30 as the incorrect answer versus 100, because at least you won't bog the system down if you do 30. So that's good too. But 50 is the maximum number that you should select. All right, so now we're going to talk about data catalog notifications. So the data catalog notifications page will inform you when new items fail to load during data sync, changes initiated via data sync are either successful or fail, or your items have been changed or deleted by an internal role. So to access data catalog notifications, you're just going to hover over data catalog and then click data catalog notifications. Then you can enter criteria to filter the list. If you have multiple order dones, I would definitely recommend that you select the order dones that you're wanting to look at. If you work in multiple divisions, I would definitely recommend that you select a division you want to look at. If you want to look at a specific item, you can actually enter that retail G10 or the shipping G10 directly, and you can see messages just about that specific G10. Just be sure that you do enter the retail G10 in the retail G10 field and the ship G10 in the ship G10 field. That's a really common mistake that gets made. You can also filter by create date. So again, if you know that you loaded a bunch of stuff in there 2 weeks ago, and you know you loaded a bunch of stuff in there yesterday, then you want to review what was loaded 2 weeks ago, maybe there were some issues, you could put in that date range there. And also a vendor stock number would be really useful to you to filter. Once you've entered that information, we click search, and then you can review the information down here. So you will see multiple lines for a single item. That's completely normal. So even if you do enter just a retail G10, you could see multiple lines for that. But these are the two columns that you're going to want to review, the notification code and notification description. So the notification code legend. So E1 would be that there's just some kind of issue when you synced over and it just wasn't able to be loaded. This is going to be more for new items that you're trying to sync over. E2 through E7, I believe, are all related to change requests. So if the change request fails because of a business rule, that would be E2. If it's deleted by an internal user, that'd be E3. If it's returned by an internal user, that'd be E4. Or if they change that change request, that would be E5. If they delete the change request, that's going to be E6. And once the change is operational, it'll be E7. So you receive a lot of information whenever you sync over changes. You're going to get information even if there aren't any issues with that item. And then finally, E8 would be if you have new items that you synced over and then they're deleted in a different role. Note that these notifications are removed after 30 days. So since there can be multiple lines for a single item, once you have reviewed and resolved, maybe tried to resync something, you may want to clear this out. And you can do that by selecting over here under the action column and then clicking clear all up here at the top. So any questions about the data catalog notifications? It really just provides some basic information for you. Like I said, we can't access your data catalog accounts because those are by different companies. So if you need more information than what we can provide there, you'll need to reach out directly to your data sync providers. All right, so next we're going to talk about the general task list. Any change request that's submitted by another role that requires vendor approval will be found in the general task list. So you can hover over task list and click general. It's going to load this page. You've seen this page before. You can select your paid items number. You do have to select your division, and then you would click Get Task List. So just like with the returned items task list, you're going to want to review these details. So over on the far right side, you would click Show Details. It's going to pop up in a new window. You'll see some additional information. So with this one, we can see under Type, this is a change. Under Change Detail, we can see that it's actually a cost change specifically. So if you were in agreement with that cost change, you would select the items over here on the left side, and then you would click Multi-Edit. So once you go into Multi-Edit, you would want to click the Workflow tab, and then you would want to select Approve. And if you select it down here at the bottom of your screen, it will select it for all of the items that you currently have in Multi-Edit, so you don't have to select it one at a time. Then you would click Check for Error, Submit Workflow Tasks. So if there are warnings, it will come back. You'll have to click the Submit button again. If you do receive hard errors, then something has to be changed before it can be approved. But most likely, if this was approved by another role and it just came to your task list, there's probably not going to be errors in most cases. It would just be warnings, and you can ignore warnings. All right, so it looks like someone's typing a question. So if anyone else has a question about the general task list, you can go ahead and ask that as well. Okay, so I got a question from Stephanie. She asked if a merchant returns something for you to do, such as approve a price increase and it's not completed, will it remove itself after 30 days? Okay, it will not remove itself after 30 days. It is just going to sit out there pretty much indefinitely. So that's why it's always important if you don't agree with it, first reach out to your merchant and say, hey, this isn't what we agreed on. And then you can actually delete that change request by, let me see if I can actually show you real quick how to delete a change request. Give me 1 second. All right, let me share my screen. That's a really good question. That one makes sense. Okay. All right, so this is going to be a little bit different because I've approved this into the merchant role, but it's going to be kind of the same process once the merchant has returned it to you. So if I wanted to delete a change request, I can click this Changes tab. And there I can see the pending changes. And you can click the change request number hyperlink, and that'll take you where you can view the change request. And when you're on this page, that's where you can click Delete Change Request. And that's how you delete a change request. So it's pretty simple. It's not difficult, but you do have to make sure that you do delete that change request if you don't intend on actually approving it. Otherwise, it will just sit out there. So good question. All right, I do have a couple of knowledge checks for you. So any change request submitted by another role that requires vendor approval will be found in which task list? All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, so it looks like we got a variety of answers. The correct answer is the general task list, so the one task list that we just discussed. If a change request is submitted by another role and it requires your approval, like the cost change, it's going to show up in your general task list. All right, we got another question here. Change requests that have been synced over will be found in which task list? So these would be change requests that you've synced over from your data sync provider. Okay, just a couple more seconds. All right, the majority of you did get this one correct. The answer is the data catalog new item task list. So anything that gets synced over, whether it's new items, change requests, or new vendor packs, are always going to go to data catalog new item task lists. Good job. And one final question. If an in-process item is returned to the vendor role for updates, it will go to which task list? All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, most of you did get this one correct as well. This one, it would go to your returned items task list, so good job. All right, just a few things to wrap up today's session. So a few reminders here. Quick search is a snapshot of an item and may not be accurate with the location of the item. So view the Changes tab to view where each component of the item is located. In-process items returned to the vendor role for updates will be located in the Returned Items task list. Change requests for some fields can be synced from your data sync provider. After syncing, approve those changes from the New Item Data Catalog task list. Some fields can be updated using the Changes grid or Change Existing Items feature. Multiple change requests for up to 50 items can be done at once. Review data catalog notifications for details on items that fail to load during sync or to confirm whether changes initiated via data sync were successful or failed. And then finally, change requests submitted by another role that require vendor approval will be located in the general task list. So we're wrapping up a little bit early today, but I will stay on the line for a little bit in case you do have some questions. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Day 4 session will be at the normal time at 2 p.m. tomorrow.